So we're going to cover both synthesis working group proposals and site exchange opportunities. Both of those are very near the top of the right-hand sidebar on the LTR website if you're having trouble finding the links. And the links are also live in the presentation that was shared. And essentially everything I'm going to say right now is also included in those links. LTER Network Office was founded by NSF to foster enhanced collaboration, synthesis, training, and engagement across the 27 sites of the network. It's hosted at the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. Was the first synthesis center and a model that has been followed by many others over the years. Just going to back up to that slide a sec. One of the things that is pretty unique about LTER is that our sites encompass a really wide variety of ecosystems. So that whole range from marine and coastal to polar and urban and grasslands and forests. It's pretty unusual. Even NEON doesn't have that breadth. Many of the other networks focus more on a particular ecosystem. So that's got some opportunities inherent for understanding general principles of ecology when we can combine the data across sites. We've got 44 years of data, mostly collected in 5 core areas, as well as human-environment interactions a little bit more recently. Those core areas are populations, disturbance, primary production, organic matter cycling, and nutrient cycling. And we've discussed in the last 10 years whether those ought to be updated somehow. And generally, the feeling is that it is important to continue to collect data in those areas. That doesn't mean the questions need to be focused on those areas. Those areas enable questions that are enable a whole suite of questions. LTR data is found primarily in the Environmental Data Initiative repository, which you can access and search through Data One. Data One also searches, I think it's 100 plus other repositories. But you also will find specialized LTER data in GenBank and the Arctic Data Center and BICO-DEMO and GBIF and many other places. Data One is generally still the best broad go-to, but if you're looking for particular kinds of data, of specialized data, you should look other places as well. We are really excited about opportunities to combine LTER network data with data from other networks, other investigators, including, I've thrown a bunch of logos up here, but a pretty broad net. Some current working groups are doing flux data, working with Ameriflux and LTER data. There are other working groups combining LTER data with LTAR data, the long-term agro-ecosystem network, USGS data. It's a great way to go. It's a great way to take the deep data that is available through LTER and understand how it applies across a broader geographic and sometimes organizational scale. So really, what is synthesis? For the purpose of this opportunity, we define synthesis as bringing together the results of multiple studies to test novel hypotheses. So it is retrospective. It is looking at data that has been collected and combining it. Network is working on other opportunities to think about how we do research that prepares data to be better synthesized, and that designs collaborative experiments. But this is about data that has been collected. And certainly synthesis can be done by individuals as well as a group, but this opportunity focuses on groups. We think there are some important qualities in doing group work. So you can have many people that are intimately familiar with the data sources. You can incorporate diverse skill sets and ranges of perspective. Um, if the many hands that are working on it are well coordinated, they can create efficiencies. And it just creates some great opportunities for mentorship in the network, for senior researchers to impart the deep understanding that they have gained over many years to junior researchers, and conversely, for junior researchers to apply new skills and ideas that are that they sometimes have more of than senior researchers. People have lots of reasons for participating in working groups. The chart on the right comes from a survey of working group participants over the last 8 years, and some of the most common reasons that people cite are just the exposure to other people's ideas about the science and the chance to problem solve as a group and network. But everybody's got different reasons for wanting to be involved. So in the last 3 years, we have developed a slightly different approach to synthesis working groups. Over the 30 years of NC's history, the model has been, it's evolved, but it's been fairly similar. It's generally been 3 or 4 meetings over 2 to 3 years, with off-site work progressing in between, but really intensive activity during that particular meeting. We have, in the last couple of years, added to that. It is definitely not a replacement for that model, but added to that a type of working group that is really focused just on one meeting. So we support virtual meetings and virtual activity around that. It can be a year of virtual activity leading up to an in-person meeting, or it can be an in-person meeting that launches a year of virtual activity, or the meeting can be embedded right in the middle. We leave that up to you to figure out what works for your group, but it is one meeting. That's the type of synthesis group that we are funding this year. Next year, we will have an opportunity for that full 3 or 4 meeting synthesis working group. The kinds of work that we think are most appropriate for this opportunity are ideas for synthesis where maybe you don't yet know how much data is out there that addresses the particular question you're interested in, or you don't know how feasible it is to do the kind of analysis that you're interested in. So you want to get a group of modelers and a group of empiricists together and sort of figure out, is this even doable? And if it is, where does the data live? Where do the data live? Who are the right people to have involved? It is essentially a planning for synthesis meeting in some ways. Or alternative, on the flip end, you might have been involved in a virtual process over a period of time, and you really just need to get a group of people together to bang out some products, to really, have the rubber hit the road. As I said, next year we'll have opportunities for full proposals. So SPARC groups that are funded this year, there is absolutely no prohibition on submitting a full proposal for next year's opportunity. So you can sort of think of this as essentially the first meeting of a full proposal. And we welcome that kind of series of submissions. Like I said, we are most interested in proposals anticipated to return high impact results. the focus is those 5 core areas, but questions can be around. We've had some great working groups on biodiversity and productivity. We've had great working groups on resilience, on movement on very specific questions around nutrient cycling in rivers, for instance. Connectivity is an area where there's tons of interest. So take your focus and sort of think what it could be when applied at a much broader scale. Who's eligible to submit? Individuals of any nationality with a position in an academic institution or a research lab, essentially a scientific society, NGOs. It is absolutely not limited to LTER participants. One of the advantages of the synthesis working groups is that we are not giving salary funds. So we're not handing over any money to your institution. We are supporting your travel and your collaboration here. And so often postdocs who may not be able to submit grants at their own institution are able to apply for synthesis funds. It's LTER funded, so we do say that you must include data from at least 2 LTER sites, and we strongly encourage the involvement of LTER researchers because they're familiar with that data, as well as LTER information managers or other folks who have strong quantitative skills. In terms of group composition, we have a bunch of resources for how to think about this, but the basic principle is you want a range of people in different career stages with different perspectives. You want to take advantage of the fact that you're able to pull this group together. You want some people who are really good at organization. You want some people who are really good at paying attention to group dynamics. You want people who work in complementary fields. I know it can be challenging. We're recommending a limit of 15 individuals. It can be challenging to identify who that person is. We're happy to try and connect you with people that we think meet some of those qualifications, but we also have, we've got a limited network too. So think who you know, and then think kind of a step or two out from there. Also remember that synthesis groups are really valuable networking and career building opportunities, and find ways to involve people who are not already part of your sort of inner circle. You absolutely can reserve a couple of spots for people that are not yet determined, but you should describe in the proposal how you intend to find those people. So let me pause there and ask if there are any questions on that kind of big, broad set of information. And then we'll dive into kind of the nitty-gritty of what we're asking for in the proposal and exactly how things are funded. Okay. So one of the things we ask for is a participants table, names of individuals. If they're affiliated with an LTER site, we want to know which site, or if they're not, we want to know what institution or organization. What expertise are they bringing? So are they, are they the person that you think is going to be really strong on modeling? Are they the person that you think has really deep knowledge of a couple of sites that you're involving in the work? What their role is on the project? Are they a PI or a co-PI of the working group? Are they contributing data? We have identified a data science liaison, so we like to have a person who is primarily responsible. I don't think of them as primarily responsible so much, but they're the point of contact around data science questions. They might work most closely with Nick, who's our data analyst. What's their career stage and what's their status in terms of the working group? Have they confirmed that they want to be involved? You've talked to them, but they're still a little unsure, or you're just hoping they want to be involved? The data that is used, we require the use of existing LTER data from more than one site. We welcome inclusion of data from many other resources. We do require that data be documented and made publicly available. That's both the LTER Network Data Access Policy and NC's Data and Information Policy. So the derived data set that you combine has to be deposited with a publicly accessible repository unless there are specific reasons not to, which might include things like indigenous data sovereignty, a reasonable delay before publication, or human subjects concerns. The kind of data science support that you can expect are SPARC synthesis working groups receive essentially a year of support, one side or the other of that meeting, or both. When the groups launch, we will have a conversation with you about how you're expecting that to run so that Nick can plan their time around your synthesis needs. The kinds of support that might include are work with reproducible and collaborative workflows, so scripting your analyses so that you can incorporate new data that you find later. That's mostly not a do for, that's mostly a help with. Direct assistance with setting up those scripted analyses. Sometimes we already have a pretty efficient workflow, and in those cases, we can just work with you to adapt that to your situation. For high volumes of data, we provide access to NC's high-performance analytical servers, and definitely help with getting your derived data appropriately deposited in repository. Also, lots of work on collaborative tools and collaborative processes. For SPARC proposals, the data table, for full proposals, we require a table of the data that you intend to use that has, specifically what are the data sources, where do they come from, what might be the legal constraints on getting or using it. For SPARC proposals, we are not requiring that table. If you know what data you're planning to use, you certainly can include it, but we recognize that for many SPARC proposals, that's kind of the point of the proposal, is finding the data and finding how usable it is. What you should include in the proposal is at least a description of what kind of data and why do you think it's applicable to the question that you're investigating. So what do we fund? We're planning on funding up to 3 working groups in this call, assuming that we get 3 good proposals. What kinds of costs are included? NCs will pay travel and lodging directly to the vendors. So we work with a travel agent, we work with hotels here, we just cover that. This year we have a change in how we're covering other costs associated. Participants are receiving a stipend for participation. It's based on the length of the meeting plus travel days. That should be more generous than what people have previously been receiving as reimbursement for meals. We have some funding also available to cover the cost of open access publication related to the synthesis. We do not fund field research or collection of new data. We don't fund anything to your salary, grad student salary, or institution, any of that. And the activities have to, address, while we absolutely welcome combining LTER data with other data, we're not going to fund things that are primarily focused on some other organization. We're not requiring budgets for SPARC groups because we have a better handle on the cost than you do. You just tell us how many people are coming and how long you expect the meeting to be. We'll fund one meeting of up to 15 researchers. 4-day meetings, in our experience, are best. They seem to have started shrinking a little bit lately as everybody's schedules get tighter and tighter, but it does take a day or so to kind of get into the process. You're going to get the most value out of it if you spend at least 3, and 4 is better. The submission process is just, the proposal is pretty short, less than 2,000 words, doesn't include figures, tables, references, or you should have those things in it, but the word count doesn't include those. Try not to abuse that. Don't cram, 500 words into your figure captions. A cover sheet references the table of participants. That's important for the SPARC proposals. Data sources are optional, and bio sketches for the lead PIs, the individual lead PI, or if you have a group, the group of 2 or 3 people that are co-leading the proposal. Key dates: informational webinar today. We'll also have this recorded and online pretty shortly. And will we have it recorded? Yes?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Great, thanks. Proposals are due April 9th. We expect to have awards announced by June, and that should give people adequate time to start scheduling their meetings for September or after. Evaluation of proposals, obviously cool science questions, contribution to and use of LTER network science. So if it's a question that sort of could be answered with other network science, that's going to be less of a priority. So really using the depth of data that's available through LTER. Does the team seem to have all the important kinds of expertise? Does it include a range of perspectives? And is the scope and the work plan feasible? The review panel includes a mix of LTER and non-LTER researchers. We recruit that panel sort of during this next period to cover a broad range of potential applications. If we find when the proposals come in that we don't have the adequate expertise on the panel, then we'll also go out for ad hoc review on those proposals. Final funding decision is made by the L&O executive director, that's Ben Halpern, and in consultation with the chair of the LTER executive board, currently Evelyn Geiser, based on the recommendations of the review panel. Tips for proposals: like any other proposal, be clear, give examples. Be sure to include participants who really stand to gain from the process, who sort of need to get products. That's a point that we have learned over a long experience. And indicate the kinds of data that you expect to include and their fitness for the purpose. So NCs, the LTER Network Office is housed at NCEAS. As I mentioned at the beginning, NCEAS is a synthesis center with staff that support working groups. So we provide great meeting facilities. All the travel and logistical support happens through NCEAS, the analytical servers, and NCEAS now has a new set of workshops on synthesis skills. The LNO really handles the synthesis group selection process. We pull the panel together and organize the panel. And we have, in addition to NC supports, concrete support from our analytical team, consultation and workshops on reproducible data skills. And I'll include in the last slide coming up next, I think, a set of resources that you might find valuable while preparing your proposal and ultimately when some of you get awarded synthesis groups. All right, I am going to stop sharing for the moment and take some questions. Okay.
I have a question. So since it seems like there's a lot of stages in the synthesis process that people can apply for this for, is there any kind of requirement or desire for like a lot of the like analytical process to be either like decided already along with the data or conducted before it's really submitted?
No, I think what we want in these proposals is a good idea, a sense that the data exist, more than a sense. Like that is often where synthesis groups fall down. What we find is that people will have a great idea. They will think there is data because they've seen titles of data sets that seem to be what they are looking for. And then they'll actually get into the nitty-gritty of it and find that those data don't actually, they aren't what they had imagined. And so I think deciding on an analytical process up front is, in addition to that, we've got a great team here with a lot of experience in doing synthesis. So fully deciding your analytical process up front would kind of short circuit the opportunity to get their input and learn from their past experience. What we do think you should decide on is how your team should work. So when do you want to meet? How do you expect to get input from? I mean, you have to have an idea of an analytical process, but you definitely don't have to have everything worked out. But when are you meeting? How do you think the different perspectives should come together? What are different people contributing? And what's the goal? I think that's a fair summary of what we're expecting.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Hey, Marty, I have a question. How common is it or is it common that groups include some kind of a data manager or data specialist that might not have um, maybe like as much knowledge about the topic that the proposal is about, but are really good at data?
Pretty common, I would say.
Okay.
Nick can pitch in on this too, but I would say probably half of our working groups have actually LTER information managers on them. The others that have been pretty successful have someone with pretty strong quantitative skills and an interest in learning about the topics of the proposal. So that kind of goes to you want different skill sets. You want people that are kind of deep into the science and the analysis. You want people who are really familiar with the sites and the data, and you want people with a strong analytical quantitative set of skills.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Francis.
Hi, Marty. Good morning. Quick question. Our group is really small, and I was looking at your presentation that you recommend around 15. So the idea would be also bring more people to the group to make it like a stronger, more robust.
Yeah. If you have a small group, I imagine you have found that there are scientific areas that you kind of don't have the kind of depth that you would like, or skill sets that you don't have the depth that you would like. So we really strongly encourage you to seek that out within or outside the LTER network. Some of the groups that have done some of the best and most interesting work in the last few years have been, maybe a third LTER researchers and 2/3 people from other networks or organizations. So think about there's a Silica working group that's combined data sets from 1,000 rivers, and they started with a USGS researcher, involved a bunch of LTER researchers, and then also expanded to include folks in Europe and Australia and even Africa. So that is that's the advantage of having a group. We try and balance that with a group that is workable. So we found if you go much larger than 15, that you end up with, kind of some hangers on that may not add that much to the mix.
Okay. And for a SPARC proposal, what would you say would be like a ideal or like best size for a group?
I'd still say 12 to 15.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Moe?
Hi, Marty. I have a question about like if we want to use the other data set, like for example, the LTAR or Neon, is it possible like the NC like can pointing people like a provided like a sport like a pointing people we can contact with them? Some of them, I don't know. It's a
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you repeat?
like we want to use some LTAR data, but
Yeah.
we are not sure who are the person familiar those data because some LTAR data is not public available. And also the some neon data is a little weird, and we also want like a contact with the people like from neon. Like, is it possible like a NC can provide in some resources like porting people who we can contact them?
Like identifying who would be the right people.
Right.
It's possible, but we probably would end up doing essentially the same thing that you would do, which is to reach out to someone you do know in the LTAR or in Neon. And if you don't know anyone, I suppose we're one step ahead of you on that. But reach out to them and sort of just start doing that hand-to-hand process of do you know who is close to this data, and then you get to them and they're not actually the right person, but they do know who the right person is. So the process would be pretty similar. We're happy to help with that if it's useful, but it would be about the same process whether we do it or you do it.
Thank you. And I have another question, like, for example, some data specifically from someone's lab, like you mentioned the river data, like they use a lot of data, but some lab is more conservative about their data accessibility, like they are not going to make a public accessible for their data. But for our project, like the SPARC program, are we like still going to publish that data, or we can like just this?
So that's where we ask in the data access statement or in the data sheet whether you know about limitations on the data availability. The place where we've run into this most often recently, especially, is in international collaborations. The sort of expectation for data availability outside the US is a little bit different than it is inside the US at this point. Mostly in the US, people are pretty good about it. But that's one reason it's good to know kind of who you think you're going to want involved. Often involving them in the project can overcome some reluctance about making their data publicly available. We also have, this is less than ideal, but we have done it in the past, published one data set that is fully public, and the second data set that on which the analysis is based is sort of embargoed until those researchers get, whatever publications they need to get out of it.
Good. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else?
Yes.
Wanda.
So I know the limit is a good amount of participants is about 15. And so you have some folks who, like, I kind of put out a feeler and a poll. And so some people, they're not quite sure their capacity or if they will be able to. And so I kind of just want to make sure I cover myself too and like reach out to other people who may be able to. And so is it okay if you have more than 15 listed, but their commitment is not necessarily sure yet? Is that okay for the table?
I think that's a limited number of those, I think, is fine. Yeah.
Okay. And then my second question is, the bulk of our data will come from LTER sites, and then we can also use additional data, but you guys are not supporting like the going out and collecting new data, but if we're just acquiring data from different databases, is that in your turn? Okay, I just want to make sure that that's not included.
That's totally what we're looking for.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I will say you are welcome to contact me individually if you have questions about a kind of a particular idea that you have, or you're looking for contacts within NEON or LTER or some other network that we might be better connected to than you are. I'm happy to talk about those things. Obviously, there's a limited amount that I can say in terms of, yeah, great idea, go for it, or not. But if there are obvious concerns, I do have a lot of experience with working groups that have and have not been successful. So I'm happy to weigh in on that. Thank you, Nick. All right. If that's it for RFP questions, I'll move on to site exchanges. It's a little bit quicker than the RFP. And where did my screen share go? There we go. Okay. It's different. All right. One sec. I've never had this happen before. Yeah. Okay.